Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Other Minds and Hands. This is episode number 104. And today, Maggie and I return to the production room as we begin concrete planning for episode 1 of our new case study on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice.
Working title, A Story Universally Acknowledged, Exploring Pride and Prejudice.
That's it.
Yeah.
So I am very proud of myself because I remember to do my homework. But before we jump deep in, Maggie, you had something you wanted to share. We had talked about New Betta's video project on the Collaboratory last week.
Yeah, we talked about new betification, and I just think you guys would enjoy this. So everything is done on this episode except for the opening titles. It's just a placeholder. So just bear with the first 7 seconds. But we thought you just want to see like a slightly finished piece that's about to go out that we've been working on for ages. And just the style of like what New Betta does. He comes in and records for like 3 hours straight and comes out with loads of stuff like this, and then we get to play. So then we got an incredible musician, we got a artist to do some sketches, we have a fantastic editor that's piecing this together, so keep note of like how the words come in and how they reflect the beats, because I absolutely love that. But just thought that I would share this. It is, I hope I'm sharing the right thing. It's about 2.5 minutes long, I think. Let's find out. Yeah. Oh, I should also say, this is about 2.5 minutes long, I think, but it's going to be a 6-parter to introduce the Einel and delay.
Yeah.
So this is just kind of the intro to the Einel and delay section of New Betification.
Hey Lord of the Rings fans, I am New Betta Do Better. I am a Lord of the Rings content creator and influencer. This is the new betification of the Silmarillion. It is my hope to make the Silmarillion as accessible as possible to people from all walks of life. Not just nerds, but also people from the hood, jocks.
Did I share sound? Sorry.
Yeah, we got it. It's a little quiet, but we can hear it.
Everybody. So today we're going to start with the Einel and delay, the music of the Ainur. This is where it all begins. You ready? Let's get into it. I know you're thinking, what the hell is the Einel and delay? Well, that's why I'm here, to break it down for you. So let me do just that. The Einel and delay basically is the creation of the world. It's the creation of the world through song. It starts off with this dude named Eru Iluvatar. He's mad powerful. He is the one. He is the creator. And then how he creates the lesser gods known as the Ainur. That's the Valar and the Maiar. I'm going to explain that a little later, but we're going to keep it moving. We're going to keep it moving. Basically, my guy, Eru, the one, the creator, the head honcho, the boss, that guy, has the Ainur create a world for his children to inhabit. Elves and men are his children. Elves are the firstborn, men are the secondborn. Of course, men are the secondborn. Hey, it is what it is. I didn't make this stuff up. I'm just telling you it. All right, boom. So they sing 3 themes of music at the behest of Eru, and this music is what creates the world that the elves are going to inhabit and men are going to inhabit. And basically that's it. Basically what happens is one of them goes buck wild, goes off script, and starts singing their own theme and tries to weave it into the music. And it gets crazy, but it's really interesting, it's really fun, and it's just dope. And you got somebody dope explaining it to you. What else could you ask for? Let's get into it.
There you go.
Oh, man.
He's got a style, right?
I just love Willie. And I got to say, he kept it pretty clean.
Oh yeah.
that was kind of impressive, actually.
That was part of the remit, that it's got to be family friendly.
Yeah, which is hard for him. I remember one time, Matt, Nerd of the Rings, and I were both on a panel with him at Comic-Con, and it was like one of the first times Willie had been on a panel. And so we were teasing him all the way leading up. We're like, Willie, remember, you can't swear. You can't swear during the panel, Willie. You get in trouble. And we're like, it's okay. We'll be standing there by the mics, ready to say beep at any time. Right. So like the whole time he was talking, Matt and I were like leaning up by our microphones, looking over at him.
No, he was good. Yeah. Like even in the raw footage, there's hardly any, which I can't say the same for my own mouth. So I was very very impressed with him.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
he did great. Yeah, I love Melkor going buck wild and anyway, no, it is awesome. It's
I like
such a fun project.
it is. I mean, I just like how he gives terminology to everything, where he's like, Iluvatar, that guy, and then that guy comes up. Yeah, we had a lot of fun doing it. And this first one took forever because you have to establish so much. Like we're
Right,
establishing tone and pace and visuals and which font are we going to use, and that's too big, and I don't like the red and the blue on the outside. Let's make those yellow and
right.
all these little adjustments, but that kind of establishes like what style is going to be like for the rest of the show. So we're hoping they come out a fair bit faster now, but we also have a new composer who just started, and he's starting with the end credits of this episode, and then we'll step in for the rest of it. So
Yeah,
it's been fun, and it's all come together in this glorious couple of week window. So
very
yeah,
cool.
great.
That is awesome. That was so
Yeah.
good to see. I haven't seen the edited version, so that was. I mean, I remember being there, and Willie with his Sauron T-shirt,
Yeah.
like a name tag, on
Well, and
the
he
front of
brought like 4 different shirts. So like he has wardrobe changes to 4 different Lord of the Rings shirts, which I
Yes,
love. Yeah.
yeah,
No, I'm glad you hadn't seen it in a while because,
yeah,
when you get so into a project, I'm dreaming these beats. So it's fun to like have fresh eyes on it and watch you react to it.
yeah. That was great. That was awesome.
Cool.
All
Yeah,
right,
hope you
so
enjoyed that.
all that's the stuff that you can get at the Signum Collaboratory. So that's going to be it's going to be in the library soon, or is that in the library now?
It'll be in the library soon.
The library soon.
It just needs an opening, so it'll be in the next couple days.
Okay, so we're
Yeah.
gonna have that generally available in the library, which is the main like content area of the collaboratory where you can see all of our stuff. And then soon, once we get a few episodes together, it'll be available on the store also.
Yeah.
So
You should also have episodes of Rings and Realms up in the next couple weeks without any commercials or anything. So
right,
if you don't want to watch it on YouTube, you can watch it straight through because we're in the process of uploading all of those.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so let's get into our production meeting.
Let's do it. Okay, so last time we decided we're going to do the 1995 and the 2005.
Yeah.
And we were having a lot of discussions about how didactic do we want to be about this? Like, do we want to just lecture? Do we want to share?
Hmm.
So one of the things I do want to do is just kind of like talk through tone because we don't want it to be straight up TED Talk and we don't want it to be straight up academic lecture. It's
Yes.
somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
I like the idea of having like theme moments where
Hmm.
let's talk about interpolation and we kind of weave that
Right.
into it, have an example
But we'd
from.
also talked about how we wanted the focus to be on the content that is on Pride and Prejudice itself, rather than on like just using it as an illustration of adaptation techniques. Right. So
Right.
we'll talk about adaptation techniques, of course, as they come up, but we're not going to make the focus of the videos won't be, like talking points about adaptation.
Yeah, I was picturing Sesame Street. It won't be like today's letter is.
Right. Today.
Right.
Right. Yes.
No, it'll be very much like I'm picturing you and I just kind of like talking back and forth and this introduction, we need to get to know the setting and the characters. So how do each of these versions do that? And we just kind of start talking through that,
Hmm.
but having a few bullet points that keep us like teaching a little bit while we do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Now, another structural question as far as outlining is concerned. Do you want to should we separate? Should we have different segments like we've done before, like a you segment, a me segment, an us segment, like that kind
I
of
think
thing?
so.
Yeah.
Do you? Yeah, I mean, that feels like a natural break for us anyway, and it also makes it a little bit easier to edit into the segments for videos. So
Mhm.
I think so.
Okay. All right. Okay, great. So in some ways then, preparation here would be similar to Rings and Realms prep as far as like the outline of what we do. Not this full scripting, but as far as the deriving of outlines and
Yeah.
me thinking through what I want to talk about in my session, you thinking about yours. Though, of course, not having the ridiculous time constraints of the Rings of Power situation, you and I don't have to go into separate rooms and do those things by ourselves. And, you know, half the time I wouldn't even know what you were talking about until, anyway, so it'll be nice to be able to talk it through together.
Half the time, 98% of the time. The first time I'd be reading the script was when it was on the teleprompter for you. But
Yes.
I also hope we can do a little bit more of the together on this, though, because I don't stand a chance of keeping up with you in Rings and Realms, whereas this, like, we can have a little bit more of a conversation about text.
Yeah.
So I think deep textual analysis, film analysis, but then maybe a little bit more of just kind of talking through what we're watching and what we're...
Because you see, another option would be for us to divide it, not by you and me, but into like focus segments, right? Like where we, like, you know, we talk about like the book and the major things in the book, and then we talk, but like you and I are both in all of them. Could be another way we do
That
that.
would be good, because then it's like, if I'm doing film analysis, then I'll lead that section and I'll be like, all right, so let's watch Bingley and Darcy ride in from stage left. Like, we know that this is forward momentum. And then I can hear you already being like, yeah, you know.
Yes.
So like having that kind of conversation while we're doing a bit of analysis, that's a nice idea. That feels natural to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can practice it in a minute. We've got the clip up.
Okay. Yes. And well, hang on, but we can't put the clip up. I just
Well,
was
we can't.
realizing
No,
this.
we can't share it.
We can't share it. That's okay. That's okay.
Maybe we can share paused frames, and we know that we're talking about the 10 seconds before and after, but we're sharing that moment on screen.
And I can get them up on a second screen here so that I can look at things.
Yeah.
Yes. These services have gotten like really paranoid.
All right. I'm going to zoom ahead a little bit then to a frame that I can share and freeze on. Also, my internet feels a little touchy tonight, so maybe it's best that I'm not streaming and sharing and downloading at the same time.
Right.
Okay. So we'll do bullet points and structure, but just in terms of practice run through, this is the opening scene of the 1995 BBC Pride and Prejudice. Previous to this moment, we have 17 seconds of them riding cross country, willy-nilly, racing to their heart's desires from bottom left of the screen up to top right of the screen. So they are very much progressing forward. Like, I want to be able to talk through that with you, and we'll have to do it on a separate screen when we're recording, and then we'll edit that element into overlay for Collaboratory. So people watching live won't be able to see the clip that we're talking about, but we can give you references to what we're looking at.
One thing, by the way, that strikes me as really remarkable, one thing I would want to talk about this, talking about this kind of establishing, not just establishing shot, but establishing sequence, right? And I say that because it's our first establishment of these characters, Bingley and Darcy, right? And one of the things that was really striking me when I was rewatching this is that one of the film has, it's easy to talk about how constricted in time film adaptations are compared to the book, right? The book has so much more time, but the book has so many more data points per second that it gets in, that it can communicate to you. So I was thinking, for instance, about how the characters of Bingley and Darcy, like their individual personalities and the relationship between these two men, is communicated to us in what we're shown in this sequence, even just in this still that you have frozen on here. Look how much more, so Darcy's on the right, Bingley's on the left. Look how much more upright Mr. Darcy is. Look how his top hat is a little bit taller than Bingley's top hat, right? Like the proportions of their hats are like the proportions of their bodies. Darcy is taller and straighter than Bingley is. Also, notice how Bingley's shoulders are kind of slumped forward, right? Bingley is a sort of a more diffident, weaker character, and he's also a less skilled horseman, clearly, than the Darcy character in when we see them riding. Like, he's in less control of his horse, and he's usually lagging behind a little bit. And we see him kind of hunched over, whereas we see Darcy, sitting like, confident and upright
Very
as he's riding
comfortable.
his horse. Yeah.
Yeah, like that.
Yes, exactly. Those are things which, like, the book does not have available to it, or rather, like, Austen is not one of those novelists who is going to, like, spend 5 pages intimately describing all of these things, right? Some authors might do that, but Austen is not going to do that, right? We don't get this scene, in fact, in Jane Austen, right? But we do get a horse riding scene. Bingley comes to the house on a horse. That's mentioned and described, but like none of this kind of details. We're not given anything about his posture, anything about it. Just the fact that he was riding. In fact, it was a black horse in the book, and that he was wearing a blue coat, which he's not wearing here. But this is a different kind of occasion. He's not visiting on this ride. But in any case, like, it really, really struck me when I was thinking about, because in my mind, when I was watching the opening sequences of both of these films again, it really struck me, to what extent how hard they are both films working, both film adaptations working to establish the characters, to establish like the relation, like the family relationships, all the Bennet sisters and parents and Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy, and even people like Charlotte Lucas and a few others. And we're being given, through very small shots and very small details, tremendous quantities of information about these characters and their relationships with each other, glances, expressions, comments. And the book gives so much less information than that. So even though it's longer, I mean, like, to read aloud the passage, what we're looking at, the opening and then up to including the first ball, with the meeting of Elizabeth and Darcy, that sequence is half of the entire first episode of 6 of the miniseries. I mean, it's half of it. It's like 15 minutes long. They spend a lot of time there, which is really neat. It was like 5 minutes long in the Keira Knightley film, though even that is like 5 minutes out of the like hour 45 or 2 hours or whatever that they had. But in the book, it's 3 chapters. Well, it's like 2 2/3 chapters, basically describing that same thing. Anyway, so that was one thing that really jumped out at me there.
And this is where, like, I can see us, this is what we do in Other Minds and Hands, is go off on tangents and get distracted by different ideas and share it. So I think that's what's, like, going to be a little tricky about how we relay this information for this, because I would love to just talk about that. Like, why is the book like version A and why are visual mediums like version B? So, just being able to kind of talk through that practice, and you can do that through text and words, or you can do that through time. When you sit down with a book, that's hours of commitment.
Yes.
Even if it's an audiobook tells you exactly how many hours you're going to be spending with these characters. So hours of commitment means that we have time to settle into this space and to create the worlds, to fill in those gaps with our own imagination based on the information that Jane Austen is supplying. We don't have that time with film, so that imagination is replaced for us, and it's given to us. So it does a lot of the heavy lifting of that scene setting. But what I loved about these two, so like, I feel like setting is going to be one of our main first points, and character introduction. Like, we've got to talk about what we're being shown and why and how, because the pacing of both these openings I find so lovely.
Yes.
It's not rushing straight into a man is in want of a wife. That's our opening line in the text for a reason, because that's setting the scene of expectation. But it's not here. Here it's lulling us into it. It's inviting us gently in to meet these people in this beautiful space, get an idea of the class society, the society that we're working within. You might find the company is somewhat, what did he say? You might find the company savage. You might find the company somewhat savage. Like, it's just painting a real picture in 17 seconds.
Yes.
And even this, like, frozen shot, like, I don't know if they could have possibly planned this in 1994 while filming, but Bingley in the light on a white horse in a lighter jacket, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if it's not a visual cue of like, he's the good, innocent, happy-go-lucky guy,
Yes.
and then Darcy on a black horse, black top hat, dark green coat, not the one we're looking at now, but his waistcoat.
Yeah.
Yeah, paints a picture.
Yeah. 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 No, I
Yeah, all
agree.
that, like, it's hard for us to not dive straight into analysis, but I'm like, I feel like there is something there for us to talk about um, introductions, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna start
So
outlining something.
let's think about topics we'd want to hit, right? So what you're talking about, actually, this is something I think that it would be really good to draw attention to, because you're right. Both film adaptations, the way I would characterize it, they draw us, they both of them work hard to draw us into this world, to
Yes.
introduce us to this world. The book doesn't do that, but the book has a
Open
very
the
good
door.
reason not to do that,
Yeah.
because the book is talking about its contemporary world, right? Like
Yes.
it assumes because it's contemporary. Like we're not gonna, in most cases, we're not gonna get a similar kind of introduction to the world if it's something that takes place in the normal everyday way. You might establish
Right.
something like, just so you know, this is in New York or whatever,
Right.
or something like that in a contemporary story.
But we don't need to imagine 200 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So being put in a clear frame of like, okay, around what time in history is this? Like what element of society are we looking at? All of those things were taken completely for granted in the context of Jane Austen's novel, because it was a contemporary novel. So that is one from the beginning, even in a sense, before the films can even begin to adapt the story. They had this preliminary work that they have to do to put people back into that frame.
I just realized that you're going to hear a lot of typing because I forget how loud my typing is when I take notes, but I'm going to take notes of our outline while we do this and share my screen so you guys can see some planning.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Before we jump too far ahead, we're also going to need to film an opening bit. So,
Oh, right.
introducing this series.
Yeah.
So why we wanted to do it, what we want to go into. So let's start with that. So why did we want to do this, Corey?
Well,
We wanted to go for a deep dive.
we're going to go for a deep dive. We wanted to do a deep dive, both in order to like do a deep dive into a subject that we both really love, namely Jane Austen, but also because it is both a good, but as a way to introduce, I don't know, but like because it is kind of an introduction. It feels funny calling it an introduction, like at episode 105 of Other Minds and Hands, as it will be, right? Like,
Yeah.
everyone who's been watching this show has been pretty well thoroughly introduced into the idea
Introduced.
of like discussing adaptation. But it is design. I mean, it's the point of this, right? In large part, is to sort of use this as a case study, as an illustration of like how, but I don't want to sound too pedantic, like we're going to teach you how to talk about movies and adaptations, but it's
No,
it's not
it's
that,
more we're gonna
but
it's we're gonna share what we do, but in a more finessed way. So
yeah,
it's for you guys like watching live, it's lifting the curtain behind some Rings and Realms planning, so you get to see a little bit more of like how we put something together. But Rings
yeah,
and Realms is a whole other kettle of fish.
right,
But so taking the time, having the opportunity, and like we said about a text that isn't as charged,
hmm,
to be able to just
yeah,
go deep and for us to practice that. I mean, I think it's as much about studio development as it
right.
is.
And that we don't necessarily need to talk about that as much in the
No,
introduction, I think, but because that feels like a part of the introduction that like wouldn't age well, probably.
yeah,
But I definitely want to talk about the less charged thing. Like, why are we choosing? Because people who know Signum Studios at all, or people who know our work, might be a little surprised that we're talking about
yeah,
Jane Austen, right? Like, why are
yeah.
we talking about Jane Austen instead of The Lord of the Rings or something like that? But the answer is we wanted, and that's what I mean by, that's why I keep coming back to the word introduction, right? We would like this to be maybe instead of introduction, an illustration of like
Yeah.
our the way our method, do we have a method exactly? I don't know that we have a method.
I think that's what we're working on right now.
Yeah, yeah, we're
We're gonna
developing
come
a
up with
method.
a method.
But if we had one, I would say our method of adaptation analysis. And then to say, like, we're choosing Austen because it's an important example for a couple reasons. First, it tends to be less emotionally charged. Well, no, it's not two reasons. It's all wrapped up in the one reason. It's less emotionally charged, and it's less emotionally charged because the story has been a classic for a long time, and there have been dozens of adaptations done over time. So even people who are diehard fans of Jane Austen are accustomed to adaptations, and they're accustomed to choosing among adaptations, holding to adaptations they love and letting ones that they don't love go. Like, it's not upsetting in the same way to watch an Austen adaptation or when an Austen adaptation comes out.
And it very clearly doesn't affect the original text for them.
Yeah, exactly. There's no threat to Jane Austen perceived in what might be a bad or ill-judged adaptation, and even with Jane Austen, of course, there have even been many modulations. There have been adaptations, the story being brought into, whether it's something like the Lizzie Bennet diaries, whether it's something like Bridget Jones's diary, whether it's something like Lost in Austen, right? There have been lots of ways in which it's been, kind of riffed into the modern world in various ways. And again, even as violent a change of the adaptation as that is something that that isn't threatening to people.
Yeah. Okay, so we want to start by, I'm still calling it an introduction to our illustration purely because we have to introduce the series.
Yeah.
But we're doing it for the deep dive. We chose Austen because of this. I think we should give some sort of expectation of structure.
Yes.
So in each episode, we expect there to be 9 episodes. I don't know if we want to quantify that in episode 1, just in case we muck it up.
Yes. We have to re-record that bit if
We'd
we're
have
not
to
careful.
re-record
Yeah.
that bit. Let's try to make sure what we say ages throughout the series.
Yes.
So we'll just say in each episode, we hope to. Okay. In this series, we'll have an episode covering a segment of the text we find to be a pivotal plot point. Each episode.
I mean, we can also, of course, just thinking about, sorry, I'm still on your previous point, just mention that we do in fact both love Jane Austen. Like, this is not just like some kind of clinical choice on our part. Like, we're both really excited to do this analysis as well.
Yeah, we want to talk about things that we're passionate about.
Yeah, exactly. And so even though Jane Austen is deliberately, not in our, primary generic wheelhouse, nevertheless, it's something we're excited to talk about.
We're super diverse. We can talk about so many things.
So true. So true.
We just don't. That's all.
Exactly.
All right. In this series, sorry, my brain immediately went off into a Marvel tangent. I'm like, when are we going to talk about it?
Yes.
All right. In this series, we'll have an episode covering a segment of the text we find to be a pivotal plot point. Each episode will provide.
Right. So finishing this sentence is a challenge because I'm thinking we're again. So how you were just talking about how the new Betta first episode took a really long time. This is why I'm wondering if we might need more than one planning session for episode 1.
I think that's probably a safe bet.
I'm thinking that for episode 1, in actually planning an episode, we'll get a better feel rather than trying to predict right now what is the shape of our discussion. I think doing it and then seeing what the shape is and then probably following it from. That's what happened in Rings and Realms. Our segments were just kind of what we wanted to talk about in episode 1 back in the day. And it was like, okay, that works. Let's keep doing that.
Well, and compare season 1 to season 2 when we didn't script versus when we did. We learned a lot about how to structure what we wanted to go over. So, I think taking this episode right now to just kind of talk through what we think we want to do. Maybe next episode, which is not next week because you're not here, but the following week, we actually do like a bit of a dry run and talk through the episode as if we're filming it.
Right.
And that way it doesn't matter if it's messy and we can stop and we can
Yeah.
talk about things. And then we have a cleaner first run to film. And then that's our model for following episodes.
Sure. Sure.
Sounds like it makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with it.
We'll see how we do with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Okay. All right. So there's a general overview of our introduction. So let's get started.
Okay.
I hear new Betta when I say that. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. All right. So we have the openings and the ball. Do we want to consider those separately? I think we're combining them because the point is what we're talking about here is the start of the story, right?
Yeah.
And in order to start the story, we have to establish the setting, we have to establish the characters, and we have to start the plot.
Yep.
And so what we're going to be looking at is how the book and the two films accomplish those three tasks.
Yep.
And as we've already discussed, the book doesn't establish the setting almost at all.
Correct.
I mean, we're given, I'm trying to remember, let me look for a second. I'll look at the text here for a minute. I'm trying to remember. I know that Derbyshire is mentioned.
Let me stop share so you can share.
Oh, it's okay. I got it.
Text on the screen.
I can share it. Everybody else can see it, but you right now.
Oh, sorry.
So you could keep sharing actually, if you wanted to. I don't think so. Let me do a search. Hang on. Hertfordshire.
There it is.
Okay, chapter 3. It isn't mentioned what part of England they're in until the beginning of chapter 3, so soon after his arrival in Hertfordshire. Okay, good. So that confirms my suspicion that we're not even told what part of England we're in at the beginning of this story. That it's in the current, like, roughly contemporary time period, and that it is in England somewhere is assumed basically by the novel. Okay, so scene setting, but as we said, the films do a very great deal to establish the setting, not only to tell us like British historical costume drama, right? From olden times, but probably not knights in armor times, but like from
Horse and carriage times,
right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, like that's what is kind of being, and I know I'm being deliberately dumbed down but like, that's kind of conceptually what it shows, right?
Yeah, and they don't go into detail with the location by showing us a map like we get in Lord of the Rings or anything like that. But they do say things like, how it's half a day's walk from here, and how the roads are to London, and
Yes.
taking that journey up to Derbyshire and things like that. Like, they do plant a couple of seeds for us to be able to draw a map
Yes.
in our brain,
Yes.
depending on how well you know England.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So this first segment, if we talk about scene setting, that discussion would focus almost entirely on the adaptations and comparing the two of them. Now, when we do that, there's going to be points of comparison that I'm going to want to make to the book, right? Because they are bringing in stuff that the narrator tells us. Because this, of course, like, if the film can provide to us all of this information that it's doing, like many, many pieces of information every second, as I was describing before, and the book can't do that. The book will just say they rode in on horses, right? But what the book has that the films generally do not have is a narrator, right?
Yeah.
Who can just pause the dialogue and say, they had been established in Derbyshire for, or whatever, we not only tell us like background facts or other things that we might need to know. And Austen does this in chapter 1. So again, I'm going to, I don't need to share, but I'll just read it for a second. There's the opening conversation in chapter 1. But here it is. We've had this discussion, but like the back and forth between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, which ends with Mr. Bennet's quip, "Depend upon it, my dear, when there are 20, I will visit them all." Right.
Yeah.
And that's the point where the narrator interrupts the story for the first time. Mr. Bennet was so odd a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice that the experience of 23 years had been insufficient to make his wife understand his character. What an awesome sentence that is. So good. Notice it's a sentence about Mr. Bennet, but it also tells us an immense amount about Mr. Bennet and also enables us to draw conclusions about their relationship as well. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like how they communicate with each other and how difficult some of this can be. It just paints such a comedic, sharp, dry moment that you are in their living room. Like you can hear their conversation.
Yes.
So, we don't just have to see it in a scene on a film. Like it gives us that space to like, Darcy was aloof. Okay, well, we've just been told that he's aloof. We'll see that he's aloof in the film, but we are told that he's aloof in the book. And
yes.
That is a pretty big difference.
Yep. Yeah, there are other examples, but they're later on in the story. So, but that's a classic example of what it's funny. I'm seeing picture in picture here.
I know, sorry. I wanted to see the text too.
The classic example. So that is a classic example of the narrator interrupting us, right? To give us the kind of information that the films are conveying through, not just through dialogue, through tone, through facial expressions, through posture, through camera angles. There are like many, many tools that they have to try to convey that same kind of information, but they don't have the direct access, right? They don't have the direct access that the narrator has just to tell us things, right? And we, of course, like, as I said, there's the things that Jane Austen's narrator is just flat telling us. And then there are the things that Jane Austen's narrator is leaving us to conclude from what she tells us. Jane Austen's narrator is a very delicate narrator, delicate in that there's very often much behind her words that she's not explaining, right? She's very much not I'm going to spell everything out laboriously to you. No,
but she's gonna open the door for you to read between the lines, though, a little bit too.
Yes. Nathaniel Hawthorne, she is not. I'm thinking about Hawthorne because we just visited the House of Seven Gables a couple weeks ago. Bridget and I did, and I was feeling guilty because I've never actually read the House of Seven Gables yet. But I was reflecting on the Scarlet Letter, of course, which in my opinion is just a hilariously funny example. I can see why they always teach that early on in high school English, because it's a book that like literally interprets itself. I remember I went back and reread it once. It was a little while ago now. It was like a decade ago now, but I went back and reread it for the first time since I had been in high school, and it was after
I don't think I've read it since high school.
Yeah, and it was after I was a professor. It was hilarious because I was reading it, and as I'd read it, like I'd be thinking. So I'm listening to it, and I'm thinking like, oh, I see what he's doing here. He's doing this interesting thing, and then literally the next sentence would be the narrator saying, "And this is the symbol that I was just," and he'd spell out exactly what I just thought. I'm like, oh yeah, it's like
there it is.
It's like a
you don't
DIY.
Usually hear this. You don't usually hear the Scarlet Letter referenced as hilarious.
Oh, it was so funny because I'm like, it's like self-interpreting. Like he just puts it all out there. There it is.
That's
like
so
you can't miss a thing because he makes sure you won't. Anyway, Austen is not like that. She does not spell everything out in that way. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So right, we get no narrator. Setting. So we're talking about setting. Let's continue rather than doing like details on this one. Let's go through and list other things. So we're going to do setting, scene setting. We're going to do character establishment, character, and I guess I would say like dynamics, like relationships, but not just relationships, like the dynamics between characters. Character and character relationships. And this is where I think a close analysis of the text and the films, and both of the films is going to be really interesting. And we're going to have to choose examples because there's like tons. They're doing, all of these are doing a ton of work with all of those characters. So we'll have to, I mean, we should choose Elizabeth because that's pretty obvious. If we would choose a second one for this opening, I would nominate Mr. Bennet.
Okay.
I would nominate Mr. Bennet not because he's the most important character, but because he is an interesting one to. He's. I want to call him one of the most unusual characters. Another thing that Austen does is she will invoke like stereotypes, basically. And she'll play off those stereotypes in interesting and often very subtle ways. But Mr. Bennet is not a stereotype. Like, he's different. He's strange. He's unusual. And Phil, I agree. Jane Austen gives us a lot of information about him. And really, the whole 3 chapters this whole opening sequence is not only introduced by conversations that are being dominated essentially by Mr. Bennet, dominated in the sense that he's controlling them. He's not the one who talks most, of course. That's always Mrs. Bennet, but he's the one who is like managing the conversations. And also at the end, like as soon as they come to this ball, Austen funnels most of the like what the reader is supposed to take from the ball through the report to Mr. Bennet, who in the book isn't there. He doesn't go to the ball.
Right, but in their society, he'd be the only one that would actually have the power to do anything. So that makes sense.
Exactly.
He's kind of the catalyst.
Yeah. So he's an important framing character for the story, framing that element, that sort of portion of the story. But of course, I mean, Darcy, I think obviously Elizabeth and Darcy are the 2 like presumptive ones that we really have to focus on, I think.
And Bingley, surely.
Bingley. Yeah, we could do Bingley also. I will say that the 1995 Pride and Prejudice miniseries had me when they included my favorite line from Bingley. When he says to Darcy at the ball, "I wouldn't be as fastidious as you for a kingdom." I love that line. Like, that is so Bingley and shows you so much about his relationship with Darcy.
Yeah.
That I just, and I was so delighted when they actually had him say that on screen. I was like, oh man, the adaptation is the best.
Concur.
Anyway, Darcy. So Bingley would be good. I mean, obviously, like once you start being like, oh, but they did such a great job with this.
Well, and we also have to think
it's
about
hard because there's so many.
Yeah, and we have to think about who's in these. So, like, just the opening scene, that's not really workable because we get Elizabeth, Darcy, and Bingley in one, and really just Elizabeth in the other one until she enters her house. So, like, that doesn't really work. But going through to the ball, I mean, it's maybe we do like a big picture overview of characters. Like, it's very important for us to recognize class that we have, and also geographies. Like,
by the way,
the London elite is not the same as the countryside elite.
Put class in the scene setting thing.
Yeah.
That is so prominent in both of the adaptations.
Yeah. And necessary.
Yes.
Necessary, I mean, not the classes aren't necessary. So that sounds awful. You must stay in the class you are born into. No, I mean, necessary.
It's not an endorsement, just an observation.
Not exactly, not an endorsement. I just mean it's necessary for us to take in the importance of that, because obviously there are certain thresholds that are unacceptable for people to cross within. So we have to know that in order to understand the dynamics that are coming.
And it is such a classic example of things that Austen totally takes for granted. There will be single words or sentences that people will say which give really clear signals to her audience, which are totally lost on modern people, especially modern Americans.
Like the description of the carriages and the horses, and the detail that Mrs. Bennet goes into of Bingley's horses. Like, how many?
Right.
Which
exactly. How many horses he had to his coach. Yeah, exactly. Or even like, think of the significance of Bingley's line, "I do love a country dance."
Yeah.
right? I mean, like there's so much there, about not only about his character, but that like gives class signals about them, their context, about, Meriton, and
Yeah.
its cultural context. And yeah, I mean, so, but yes, whereas like, again, to so many American readers, that's kind of opaque. So the films do a lot of work, of various kinds in order to demonstrate, how that stuff works. So yeah, that's important.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so back to characters. So so we avoid the like Mr. Darcy isn't in the opening of the book problem by basically saying we're considering the whole thing from the opening, from the very beginning to after that first ball. We're considering that whole thing the opening, like that whole sequence the opening. Now, it does mean that we kind of need to talk about Elizabeth first and register the fact that Elizabeth and her family are established before we ever even see Darcy, right? Though not, as you've pointed out, in the BBC adaptation, right? So, yes.
Can you and I talk about that for a minute? Because I think that is kind of interesting that they chose to have Bingley and Darcy introduce it and to talk about getting property and buying a place in the countryside. Like, what an interesting choice for an opening scene.
For Bingley and Darcy's voice in a conversation never related in the book, to be the opening scene, to be the very first impression of this world and of this story is really interesting.
I assume it's to just kind of introduce, like, these are outsiders coming into this space. And then we get the heroine of this space. I'm saying this space with capital letters.
Yes.
So like, they come into this space, and
whatever
then
this space is.
And then we get to meet the actual heroine of the space and the world that she has, and they are now going to be part of it, but we already know who they are. So it's kind of like a gentle way to introduce those characters and establish people coming from the city buying country property, not invading, more vacationing.
Right.
A desirable location, a desirable thing of their class to do so.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it's a bit of a risk from the beginning as far as its relationship with the book, because, and this is my wife's observation. I will credit her with this. I remember her saying this to me decades ago, that, Jane Austen never, or almost never, depicts a scene where men are talking among themselves without a woman present. It almost never happens. And like the reverse Bechdel test, Jane Austen would fail, basically.
Isn't that refreshing?
Like she never depicts like totally masculine circles.
Yeah.
Right? Where women are not admitted, or where just even where they're not present. And I can't off the top of my head think of a single example of a conversation that she depicts of like two men in a closed room or by themselves talking to each other. It just almost never happens in any of Jane Austen's narratives. They're always at least like implicitly like have this kind of feminine presence, right? Like they're from the perspective of like the feminine experience within the society.
I mean, the only ones I can think of are conversations about women.
Right.
So, yeah. So like, even if women aren't there, it's the two of them discussing a proposal, or the two of them discussing.
But even then, I don't think we're shown it.
And did that happen in the text?
No, it doesn't happen in the text.
Yeah,
it doesn't happen in the text. We learn that it happens in the text, or like it's implied that they do. It's not that like Austen's men never do talk to each other. We just never hear it. Right.
Whereas that does happen in both films.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All the time. And so to begin, like to start, like scene one, curtain rises on two men by themselves.
Two men by themselves talking property. What?
Yeah, like that's a I show clothes with his with his solicitor at once, right? Like that, it's like, okay, That's a conversation that Austen never describes.
Yeah.
Right? It's a kind of conversation she never describes. And so I remember, I did not watch this with my wife the first time she watched it. Because my wife, needless to say, was watching it live when it came out. She was like every week waiting for the next episode to come out.
Love it.
I remember when that happened in 1995. We were both at college. So I knew her. I was friends with her then, but I was not part of the watch party for that when it came out. But I remember she had a strong reaction to that. Like, she told me, she was like, I wasn't sure, but like in the opening scene, I was nervous about this adaptation because it seemed to her like an almost kind of tone deaf thing to do at the beginning, to start the story in a masculine space. It's like, that is so anti-Austen. So that's what I mean when I say it's risky.
I'm trying to think where we would fit something. See, I'm trying to get bullet points out of this, but I don't think that's where we're going to function today. But
We may have to condense into bullet points next time.
Yeah, that means that we need to find a time over the next 2 weeks to try to do bullet points so we can do a talk through.
Because you know what we're kind of doing today? Today we're kind of doing the equivalent of when we watch it together and pause it and just talk it through.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're doing today. Thinking back to Rings and Realms prep.
Yeah, I'm like, which next time we do Rings and Realms for like season 3 of Rings of Power, we will set up a camera at some point and just have you guys watch it with us because it's real fun. We just talk through, pause the episode, figure things out, argue, look at maps, open books. It's really fun.
It would take more time, but maybe we could actually do that. Like we can't be able to show it on screen, but we could do it with second screens, like we did the fan track, not fan track mode exactly, but just to kind of watch it through and talk it through together and take notes.
To be able to, scrub and take notes and have the text next to us too.
Yeah. Yeah. We could even kind of talk through the text in a similar kind of way. Kind of taking notes from all that. That's a really good approach. We should totally do that, especially since we're already focusing on relatively narrow stretches. Yeah. So we could afford to do that. But let's keep talking about characters and stuff.
Well, I mean, that can be next week too. So like, let's still try to get our bullet points down. And then next week we'll have the reference points and talk through everything and look at text. And then maybe it'll take another week and then we film. That's fine.
But yeah, I would subordinate, well, I mean, okay. No, never mind. There's so many things. Yes. I think it's important. This discussion of the Bingley Darcy scene at the beginning of the BBC is important to both the scene setting and the character establishment topics, because it's the very opening shot that we get. And so it's important for the scene setting, clearly. So we need to talk about it in that context. But we also need to talk about it in the context of character development, because I think it is a crucial element of the BBC adaptation that we get backstage with Mr. Darcy before we even meet Elizabeth. And this is not only... it's important for so many reasons, but one of the reasons that it's important is that when we see him for the first time in the ball, we already have a context for him.
Yeah.
We already have cues. When you see Mr. Darcy for the first time acting all stiff in the ball, and that's the only time you've ever seen him, like,
you have nothing.
You have nothing.
Whereas, like, even if we're just taking that the company's quite savage, like, we already know that he does not fancy a country ball. Like that.
Yes.
That's already a space of like, oh, this will be fun to watch unfold.
But we've seen him interact with Mr. Bingley, and I don't think he smiles in that first scene, but we've seen him at least at ease.
Yeah.
In private with his friend, right?
Yep.
And on horseback having this conversation.
Yeah.
And even just that, to be able to contrast that with his stiffness at the ball, which again is a context that most notably Elizabeth and everybody else at the ball does not have, right? So of course, like, a big part of the drama of that first ball is that how he comes across, how he presents himself at the ball in that first meeting is taken by everybody to be who he is. That's his character. Yeah. His character is set from then on. And of course that
First
language, that's Austen's language. She'll talk about somebody's character being set or somebody's character being determined. By the way, we could give very Austen like subtitles to these segments, like sketching characters is her language for this, like to sketch someone's character. Darcy and Elizabeth will talk about that later on during her stay at Netherfield, not in a scene we're planning to discuss, but it'll come up. Anyway, so yeah, it would be probably for the next one.
Okay.
Not for the scene setting one, but anyway, yeah. Anyhow, yeah, but right. Anyway, so it's fascinating that there's a sense in which in the BBC one, there's a sense in which when Darcy shows up, we know him better than Elizabeth does because we've seen him before and in a different context. And that I think is just really important. Okay. So how many characters do you think we have time to do? If we do Elizabeth and Darcy, do we have time to do 2 more? 3 more?
We have time to do all of these things because we haven't set a limit on our episodes.
Right.
But hang on.
Excellent. We can do
the
them all.
goal is to try to stay concise but deep.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to close any doors yet. So let's not say you're only allowed 5. It's like, let's see what we want to say about these guys. Because you're not allowed half an hour per character.
Right.
But we are allowed 5 to 10 minutes to explore this specific element of them deeply. Right?
Yeah. But if we're going to really do...
You're like, that's not good enough.
Well, I'm like, I'm thinking like, well, okay, so 2 then. Because we're going to want, like, what I would want to do is actually look at like the cues that the text gives us to like interpret Elizabeth, right? To sketch Elizabeth's character, and the cues that each of the films give us, including like shots, posture, lines, facial expressions.
Lighting.
Posture was something I found so significant. I keep referring to posture because just watching through it struck me so much. And especially also contrast between the two of them. The most prominent difference I would point to off the top of my head from just having rewatched both of the 2 openings is that in the opening sequences, Keira Knightley's Elizabeth Bennet is primarily characterized by hunched over giggling, right? And what's her name? Jane Eyre? The actress who plays
Erle.
Yeah.
Jane Eyre.
Jennifer Erle. Yeah. Erle? Is that how you pronounce it? I'm not sure.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Anyway,
think I've only
Jennifer
seen it.
Erle, who I always feel like she is brilliant in this whole series.
It's early. I feel like it's like early.
It's pronounced with 2 syllables.
I'll have to Google it. I don't know.
I don't know.
Anyway.
With many apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. And more apologies the fact that I never give her credit and I always call this the Colin Firth adaptation rather than, the Jennifer Earle adaptation. But anyway, she is always like statuesque and proper, right? Mm-hmm. The characteristic in Jennifer Earle posture for Lizzie is like shoulders back, head proper, but with like a quiet smile on her face and a sparkle in her eye.
Very much a knowing look. The way she kind of internalizes the...
Yes, exactly.
You know that look.
And that quiet smile, like just for herself that she's, or like possibly shared with her father. Anyway, yeah. So like that's, and that's a huge difference. That's a huge, like the hunched over giggles from Keira Knightley, totally different from the way we get Elizabeth in the BBC, and neither of those do we get anything like those details. We have to infer about Elizabeth's character from other Ely, really. Wikipedia confirms Ely.
Ely.
Okay. The H, I never would have guessed. Ely. Got it. Okay. Jennifer Ely. Anyway.
And just kind of an interesting idea that there is no right or wrong.
Yeah.
Like we can look at how the text is described, and the fact that these two women have shown different Lizzies is perfectly acceptable in both ways.
It
And
and it helps us to understand like what is this story?
yeah,
What is this
and
story that I'm hearing?
and why it's so apt for adaptation. Like, oh, you're able to make both of these things completely accurately, and they're quite different. Wow, that must be ripe for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, is this where it's safe for me to like share the thing that annoyed me?
Oh, please.
Okay.
I don't
So
want my attention. I'm not taking notes on this.
this is the part I remember when the Keira Knightley one came out. My
Yeah.
wife and I watched it together, and she has like never wanted to watch it again since. She was really annoyed. And watching these openings, so I haven't seen it for a long time because my wife doesn't like watching it. I don't usually watch it by myself. So I hadn't seen it in a long time. And I kind of half watched it again. You know how the person sitting in front of you diagonally on an airplane, you get to see like whatever
Watch
they're
their
watching
screen.
at all time,
Yeah.
right? Somebody was watching this in that seat for me. And so like while I was working on the plane, because I'm always very dutiful on planes, while I was working on my laptop on the plane, I kept like, I couldn't help but glance up because I tend to look up and to the left when I'm thinking, which is like right at that screen on the, like if I'm in the window seat, like the middle seat in front of me, it's always right in
That
my,
was fortuitous.
yeah. Anyway, she was watching this. And the main thing that I was struck by when I was watching it without the sound, right, was just how gorgeous it is. It is so
Yeah.
pretty.
It's beautiful.
And I was, so I was watching it and I'm like, I really need to watch this again. It's been a long time. But watching it again as I was doing my homework was the first time I watched it with the dialogue in many years. And I remembered as soon as I watched it with the dialogue, I remembered the thing that, that annoyed my wife so much that she never wanted to see it again. And that was that it is exemplified, I think, in the scene at the ball when Elizabeth is talking to Darcy. She's overheard. Remember, so in that film, she and Charlotte Lucas are like sitting at this table, which looks like it's like under the bleachers or something. It's like in shadow, and in the background, in the light, Darcy and Bingley are talking to each other. And that's where she overhears him say that she's not handsome enough to tempt him. Right. And she looks hurt when she overhears him saying this. She looks hurt by this. That's the expression. Like it's like a saddened, slightly like not like tearful, but like wounded expression that Keira Knightley does. Even though she then she turns and laughs about it afterwards, but her first reaction is like this wounded expression. But when later on in that same ball, Elizabeth and Darcy are talking to each other. I'm forgetting. I just watched it, but I'm trying to remember who was it. It might have been Bingley pressing Darcy to dance with Elizabeth there. And she says no and turns around and walks away. But before she does, she quotes what she overheard Mr. Darcy said to his face and throws it back in his face. And like that, like from that point, my wife was like, done. I'm done. This is not Jane Austen. No Jane Austen heroine would ever do that. This is not Jane Austen's world. Like nobody, like anyone who would act anything vaguely like that would be worse than Mrs. Bennet, would be worse than this is not Elizabeth. This is not Jane Austen's world. I'm out.
I'm laughing because remember when we said this was less emotionally charged?
I know, but see, again, it is.
Because meanwhile, I'm like, that's one of my favorite moments, but that's because I can see it through a modern adaptation lens. Like that's 100% for a modern audience.
Totally for a modern audience.
To be like mic drop moment, you know?
Right.
And I'm fine with that because it's fun.
Yeah.
But like, I can see that would be the thing. They'd be like, nope.
And again, because what she was reacting to was an issue of faithfulness.
Yeah.
Right. And she's like, this is not faithful to Jane Austen's world. And even like, I mean, there are lots of examples of this kind of thing. And I do think in part it's a it's a subset of like having to explain things to a modern audience that you don't need, that Austen did not need to explain. Like Austen could get away with implying way more than a modern film can get away with implying. So there are times, for instance, when like someone says something rude and cutting in Jane Austen, but when they do it in a film, they make it like 20 times worse. They make it like so much more horrible. And I like that because like the relative effect is the same.
I was going to say, because that's like almost what you would need to do in a film
Yes.
for it to hit as hard as it did in society.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But see, but this is not like, that moment is not just like we're trying to draw out what is there. And yeah, we're like, instead of like, you know, pricking it with a pin, we're stabbing it with a sword, right? Admittedly, but like that's kind of what's needed under the circumstances. Like those kinds of things, that's like a sort of one category of things. And again, and Jane Austen is so delicate. Like she is so subtle when she's making fun of something, or when she's, you know, when she's inviting you to laugh at something, it is usually very, very subtle and very, very delicate. Not that she doesn't have buffoons, because she does describe buffoons and buffoonery happening, Mr. Collins. But again, generally, she's sure her touch is very delicate in these kinds of matters. But that it's not just somebody was a little bit rude, so we had to make them be very rude to make sure that you picked up on the fact that they were rude.
It's a blatant in your face.
She's being rude when Elizabeth would never be rude in that way. Like she is, and it's important because when it comes back to like the first proposal, which scene we are going to talk about, right? When he is listing his objections to marrying her, his objections to marrying her are totally founded, right? But they're founded on things that aren't to do with her. Like the whole point is that like it's her family's really embarrassing and everything, right? But her own behavior has always been above reproach.
She's exemplary,
And like to have her start off on that foot is like, oh, that is awful. Like that is terrible for her to be like, if he thinks little of her, who's to blame him?
Right? I mean, I hear you. I can see that argument, but I still like that line, you know, and I can see like how that decision happened, but I can also see why that might have been a pretty bold and maybe brave choice, and it probably would backfire on a certain sect. So, you know, is it pandering to a modern audience? No, I don't think so.
Pandering is such an interesting word, isn't it?
I know.
It's like it's like fan service as a phrase, right? It's like where do you draw the line between pleasing people and pandering?
Yeah, and pandering has too many connotations on it of like it's not quite the right, like, are you getting it to play gimmicky maybe is a little bit closer. Like are you trying to use it to get a specific thing out of it? Or is it, you know, a vehicle to get the concept across?
But these things, the way in which, I mean, we talked about it in the context of the setting, but I think it's an important thing to emphasize from the beginning is that these modern films, they have a different audience to connect with. They are trying to communicate with a different audience than Jane Austen was trying to communicate. That seems like an obvious thing to say, but it's a hugely impactful.
It is, and also a very different expectation because we know what needs to happen between Lizzie and Darcy. Like, we're not coming into this blind. Some people might be, but we have decades and decades of adaptations, and the BBC one is so in everybody's brain.
And centuries of the book,
by the time you show up, like, that's in, like, modern colloquialisms. Like, everybody already knows about Lizzie and Darcy. Like, it's just a thing. So it's going to play different because our expectation is set with a certain base knowledge already there. So they get to play around a little bit more. I don't know. There is something about that, like knowing that your audience is already familiar, you can play with dynamics a little bit differently.
And it's, so this is me like not being annoyed and me instead like putting on my like objective analytical hat in talking about that scene, right? in that line, that moment in the what should we call them? We're calling it the BBC, which I think is fine to call one the BBC. What should we call the other one? Who's the director? We should give credit to the
Joe Wright.
Right. So
Joe
we
Wright.
call it the Wright adaptation. That's a little
Right adaptation.
That's a little bit okay. It's
well,
fine.
let's say Joe Wright. We'll just give him the full name.
Right. So the
Joe Wright.
BBC and the Joe Wright.
Or we can say the 95 and the 2005.
95 and the 2005. That's more clunky. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
In the Joe Wright, here would be my defense of that ridiculous line that she delivers, which is so unlike Lizzie and so unlike and so unfitting to the entire society. And that is, it is designed to recruit our feelings about Elizabeth from our modern perspective, right? It's not about trying to depict her in the same way as Austen depicts her. It's trying to get us to react to her proportionately, in a sense, in similar ways to how Austen's audience would have reacted to Elizabeth there. Like they want to do for Elizabeth, to make us see Elizabeth like Austen's audience would see Elizabeth, even if what we're seeing is different. And because what we value is different. Like that kind of spunkiness, like throwing that back in the rich stranger's face. Like that is a spunkiness that a modern audience would like. Like they would appreciate it. Yeah, and can recognize
that
it.
spunkiness would have been shown in a different way back then.
Strength of character, and it shows independence of thought, and it shows and not to mention like sort of sense of humor as well, right?
I might have shared this story before, but like it makes me think of a friend of mine is a manager at a National Trust property, one of the mansions over here. And she's in charge of, acres and acres and acres of gardens. And so what do you do with it every year? How do you keep people engaged? How do you get them to come visit, but also impart the history and honor what has come before? It's this like balance, right? Of like money making and property management and culture and heritage. So one of the things they did was plant this massive field behind the house with different bulbs that flower at different times throughout the spring. So it's a blanket of purple crocuses, and then it's a bunch of red tulips, and then it's and it just keeps going. And people come and take pictures of their kids and these flowers. It's all over Instagram. It's absolutely stunning. But the whole concept of that was based off of the 1700s, that was just a lawn of grass. Because having a manicured lawn where the grass was all the same height was a gasp-worthy space to look at. Like, I've never seen anything this miraculous in my life. Well, modern audience is not going to gasp in the same way because we have lawnmowers.
We have lawnmowers, exactly.
So how do you get the same reaction to me that was an adaptation thought process. How do you engage commercially and creatively while honoring an original?
And the point was not keeping it in exactly the state that it was in. The point is changing it so as to create a parallel effect rather than even if it's not the same effect, it's still a parallel effect. Right.
And they're doing that with flowers. We're doing that with words. Like there is a divide, obviously, with like meaning, but I do think it's that like reaction side of it that has some fluidity. Cool.
Okay, so that was awesome. We didn't get all that far.
We didn't get that far.
But that's okay. It's okay.
But sometimes we just got to talk through it to see how we feel about stuff. So I do feel like next time, which is not next week, but the week after.
Next week is Myth Moot week. So but I should be back. Hopefully, if all goes well on the return journey, I'll be back for Monday for a fortnight from today.
No stress. Watch the socials in case we have to pull it last minute, but we'll plan to be here in 2 weeks. But let's plan to have the adaptations downloaded on separate devices so we can scrub through them. You'll have the text up and handy, and I'll have my book out. But in the meantime, like I know Myth Moot's in 2 weeks. Do you think we can try to like sketch out just rough bullet points for this opening section?
You mean between now and then?
Between now and then?
No. It's Myth Moot week, so I doubt it.
I prefer the honesty. That's my goal. Let's try to get some clear bullet points the next time we meet and try to not get distracted. We'll be
fine. We'll be fine. Yeah. No,
Next
I
week's
think I
gonna
think
be
I think our
another
problem
org-
here is we were trying to jump to bullet points before we'd done the initial discussion and note taking.
Yes,
That's I think
agreed.
is our problem. So if we do that new process where we do the watch through and
Yep.
like take general notes, and then
Yep.
those we can then the process of taking those and drawing those, like extracting those into a bullet
Yep.
point list is much easier than trying to
Yep.
go the other way around. So
Agreed.
even if we didn't get that far per se, we made progress because we've learned a lot about the process.
Honestly, that's what half of this is just figuring out what you need to do. So we're gonna do a watch through next time together,
Yeah.
talk through, discuss notes, bullets, go on.
Yep.
And maybe one more to do the dry run through so the following episodes can go a little bit faster. But I'm not worried about speed with this. This is just a thing we're going to continue working on. So,
Okay.
and I haven't talked to my editors yet about who's going to be editing the overlay into this. So,
Okay.
you know, I got to do a little bit of that groundwork too.
Right. Well, fortunately, they don't have any immediate pressure of work upon them. So that's fine.
I'm not stressed about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other priorities prevail.
It's good.
Okay. So we will not see you next week.
That's right.
Moot.
Not next week, Myth Moot week. So I know Myth Moot doesn't actually start until Thursday, but I'm going to be down in DC. My brother-in-law lives in the DC area, so my wife and I are going down there, and so she'll be with them all week long, and I'll be with them for the first few days, and then head up to Leesburg for Myth Moot after that.
Lovely.
Which reminds me to remind people that don't forget that you can still sign up for Myth Moot. You can still sign up for Moot Hub. You could still come in person if you wanted to, but it's getting a little bit last minute for that. But you can still sign up for Moot Hub and get virtual access to all of the everything that we can get a camera and a mic into. So, and you'll be part of our Slack discussions. So you'll be part of the overall large group discussions and stuff that are going to be happening throughout Myth Moot and all that kind of thing. So, so don't forget about Myth Moot coming up for everybody. And that's why we won't be here next week, but then we'll be back hopefully the week after that.
Fantastic. So see you guys in 2 weeks and have fun at Myth Moot. I'll be there for a little update bit and probably dipping in and out, but have a wonderful time.
Awesome. Very good. Thanks everybody.